Yeah, I do think another inspiration to my writing is actually spoken word poetry, which is why a lot of my poetry is meant to be sort of readable like that. It makes it more comprehensible to an audience that isn't well versed in reading poetry, and two, I've done a lot of poetry readings at festivals and bookstores and whatever, and I find that it is a very special kind of experience because it's one thing to be in the quiet of your house or on the subway or on the train or whatever and reading the poetry to yourself, but it's another thing to hear it in the author's voice, in the author's inflection, them sort of speaking to you with their words that they've planned out. I don't know. I find that that's a different sort of interpretive experience for the audience and sometimes for the writer as well. My poetry does utilize a lot of enjambment, which means line breaks in the middle of a sentence, and it uses a lot of repetition with slight variation between each repetition, and it uses slashes and punctuation and whatnot to dictate breaks and things, and I feel a lot of that will be lost with an audiobook.
Okay, welcome to Living the Next Chapter. I have a great guest with me today. Again, always great guests. And my guest today has a very nice new article of clothing that I was given a demonstration of. It's beautiful. For those that are listening, I will let them explain to you how gorgeous this is. But welcome to the podcast, Ariel. Nice to have you here.
Hi, I'm Ariel, and yes, this new piece of clothing is a cardigan with embroidered elements from biblically accurate angel symbology, with a whole biblically accurate angel on the back. It is gorgeous, and I love it, and I wish I had the name of the artist that was selling them, because, that would also be great. Actually, I could probably, look through my emails and find it right now.
We will definitely put a link in the show notes, and then maybe an image is going to be on Instagram, maybe, of this amazing article.
You know what? That's a good idea. I should do that.
There we go. So we'll have links to Ariel's Instagram account as well, so you can actually see this in action if you're listening. So definitely got to go check it out.
Yeah, I'm going to have to find it later. I don't know which email I used.
There you go. It's beautiful, though. It's for those who are listening. You'll have to take our word for it until you see it yourself. It's gorgeous. So, Ariel, thank you so much for making time for us on the podcast today. Where are you in this great fine world of ours? Can you let us know?
I'm in New York, in the US of A.
Beautiful. Awesome. I love New York. I've been there several times, and I just love it. Just feels like you're on a movie set all the time. It's quite strange feeling coming from Canada.
It depends on what part of New York you're from, but you're in. But definitely New York City gives that vibe sometimes.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's a very interesting place. I love it. It's amazing. Awesome. So let's jump into a little bit, Ariel, your background, because I find it fascinating. We've already had a conversation, which is great. And you kind of let me in a little bit and told me a little bit about your childhood and growing up and your culture and everything. I think that adds to our conversation that we're going to get into. Can you kind of take us back and kind of bring us up to date about a little bit about your background?
Yeah, of course. So I'm the daughter of two Taiwanese immigrants. As in, they're from Taiwan, but I was born here, as are my two younger siblings. I was born in Queens, but raised on Long Island. And for anyone who doesn't know, Long Island is pretty much majority white, especially the part of Long Island that I happen to come from. So I grew up in a very white neighborhood, went to a high school with maybe 5 other Asian kids that I knew of. And like, I definitely, especially like as a preteen, like trying to fit in, trying to find myself, that sort of thing, um, sort of rejected parts of my, uh, like ethnicity and culture to try to fit in a little bit better. Um, but there's been sort of a reclaiming process as I've grown up, um, especially since when I went to college, I went to Hunter College in Manhattan, in New York. Um, I double majored in English literature criticism with a focus in linguistics and Chinese language and literature. This was partly to, um, get in better touch with my sort of roots. Like, I did go to Chinese school as a kid on weekends, like, for about 10 years. Like, a lot of ABCs and ABTs have very similar sort of stories about growing up and going to like a language school where somewhere near where they grow up just so that they can like speak the language with their parents and stuff like that and not let it sort of die with the immigrant generation. So you learn how to read and write. You might learn a little bit about Chinese or Taiwanese culture and stuff like that. Um, so it was partially for that reason that I double majored and took Chinese as my second major, but it was partially also because I was part of the flagship program, the language flagship program at Hunter, which, the language flagship program is like a national program that I believe is funded by the Department of Defense. And there's a bunch of different languages that they do, like Arabic, French, Chinese, other ones. Hunter happened to have one of the chapters of Chinese flagship, and for that program, like part of the program was studying abroad in China. So I studied abroad in Beijing, I studied abroad in Nanjing, I traveled around China a little bit, I traveled around Asia a little bit, um, and like so I'm fluent in Mandarin Chinese. I wish I could learn more of the dialects of Chinese because Chinese has literally hundreds of dialects. Um, like even from like a town to like the next town might have dialect differences, which I find absolutely fascinating. The linguistics nerd in me finds fascinating. Also, Taiwan has its own dialect called Taiwanese, and I only know a couple of phrases from it, like 我把豆腰, I'm hungry, or 我假爸, I am full. So the basics. um, but I would love to learn more of like that dialect as well. And like language learning has been one of my fascinations throughout life. Um, but yeah, like that's sort of my like educational background, I'd say, but like my sort of uh so I have had clinical anxiety and ADHD since I was a child. And then when I was about 11 or 12, I started developing symptoms of major depression. And all three of those have persisted to this day. And I struggled a lot with those things, in particular as a teenager when my symptoms were probably most severe. And, I struggled a lot with suicidality, with self-harm, with like, a lack of self-worth and self-love. Um, and like, I also struggled with this sort of like cultural stigma that my parents held against mental illness. So I didn't have access to a lot of the like kinds of resources that you need to overcome mental illness. Um, it wasn't until college really that I started regularly seeing a therapist, and then I started taking medication, and things started to get better for me. Um, but while I was sort of wallowing in my mental illness as a teenager and into as a young adult, like um like I thought a lot, I wrote a lot, and a lot of that sort of thinking and processing and writing has come together through like the course of several years to produce my book Narcissus. My book Narcissus was written over the course of most of like 2020 to 2021. I worked with a like an assisted self-publishing program called the New Degree Press, which they give like for a pretty low fee, like editorial support, marketing support, support on like basically how to do the self-publishing process and market yourself and stuff like that. And I was able to come out with an ebook, a paperback, and a hardcover copy. So I have both the paperback and the hardcover copy here. But as you can see, the covers are the same. The spines are like they say Narcissus and my name. They have a little flower there. For those who don't know, Narcissus is the Latin name for daffodils. And that's why there's daffodils sprouting out of the figure on the front of my cover. It's because of the Greek myth of Narcissus, which we can get into if you like.
Yeah.
Which inspired sort of the titling of my book and a lot of the sort of themes that my book is centralized around.
Can we talk about the cover itself? Like, it's beautiful. Can you show it again?
Yeah, so it says Narcissus up top in this nice, pretty script that I picked out. It says my name at the bottom, and I worked with an illustrator. I totally forget her name, which is a travesty. But she was with New Degree Press, like she was like on their team. So like basically what she did was sort of like a mixed medium thing. Like these flowers up here are done in watercolor digitally, of course, but the figure is more of like a sketch type of thing, like a pen sketch. So it's a mix of mediums and it creates this image of like a woman with flowers sprouting out from her face and head, partially obscuring the face and also like sort of symbolizing like this, new growth, like forming from possibly her thoughts.
It's amazing to see how an image on the cover of a book can capture a little bit about the book as well, right? So there's a message in the photo, right?
I think that's the point of a book cover, like, because like when you're in a bookstore or something like that, the first thing that will catch your eye is the spine of the book, probably because that's how they have it laid out on the shelf. But then if that interests you and you pull it out, the first thing that's going to catch your eye is the cover. So I and this illustrator worked really hard on this cover because like, it's super important for the marketing of your book to have an eye-catching cover. And for me anyway, like, I'm not a visual artist. My medium is words, but, like, my Instagram will be linked in the show notes. And like, if you can see with my like book Instagram, like I tried really hard to go with a lot of visual symbolism. And that's a sort of like thing that made marketing my book so hard, was because I was trying. I mean, like, there's a couple of reasons marketing my book is really hard, but one of the reasons was that I was going for this really like artistic bent, because that's what I wanted. I didn't care so much about like becoming like a bestseller or whatever. Like, I cared about like the artistic message of my book and sort of the just general themes and messages of my book being like understood and put out there and related to by the audience. And so, yeah, that's like, that was that.
It's like words paint a picture and a picture says 1,000 words, right? They kind of go back and forth. So yeah. I love the idea that you're your cover kind of captures and invites us in
Yes.
to your book. I really like that. So it's beautiful, by the way. It's really well done. So
thank you.
Be proud of that. That's great. Let's talk a little bit then about your author journey. Why is it important for you to share what you're writing? Like, what does it do for you as an author?
I mean, so when I started out writing, I was very, very bad, but I was writing for myself. Like, I was writing mostly just to sort out my thoughts, because I always think in terms of words, but like, they sometimes things get muddled, or like I'm just in sort of a brain fog or something, or like whatever, and things just aren't clear until I write them out, and then it's like, or say them. But because I had no one to talk to for a good period of my life, like about the sort of struggles that I was going through, I turned to writing instead. And poetry, especially like free verse poetry, has always sort of enticed me. Like, I think one of the reasons why a lot of people find poetry daunting is because their only exposure to it is in school. And in like American public school, I don't know how it is elsewhere, but in American public school, we tend to read a lot of like the older white male Euro-American canon, right? And a lot of it like rhymes and like has a lot of symbolism, and it's really nice, and they're like classics for a reason. Or it's like Shakespeare, and like half the class doesn't understand what's going on. I am. This is just a side note. I'm a strong proponent of reading the Shakespeare play, but also watching a good adaptation of the Shakespeare play when you teach the Shakespeare play. That's just a little note for all the English teachers out there or whatever. Like, find a good adaptation, and that way, your sort of students will be able to see the play the way it was meant to be seen. Like, the play is not really meant to be read; it's meant to be seen. Like, that's how Shakespeare intended it, and you know, your students might be able to get a lot more out of it if they just like watch and read, and then they'll like catch more things. But that's just my take on it.
Good.
Anyway, so like with my writing journey, like I took classes, like creative writing classes in high school, and my creative writing teacher, I still remember him. I think he's a doctor now, Gregory Wrightson. So Mr. or Dr. Wrightson, if you're listening, wherever you are, thank you. I tried to send him an email once, like when my book came out, being like, I don't know if you remember me, but you are a huge inspiration to me in like, you know, making me think that I'm actually a publishable author. So if you're out there, Mr. Wrightson, thanks. Your words meant a lot to me, and they always will. But I basically like, you know, refined the craft of writing more and learned about the importance of sort of writing towards an audience, like not just for myself, but towards an audience such that they can actually understand what I'm saying. And that way, like, I believe that all literature, all art really, but all literature is meant to be a kind of silent dialogue between the author and the reader. Like, the literature by itself has meaning, maybe, that the author may or may not have intended, but it's that dialogue between the audience and the art that really creates meaning, in my opinion. Like, that's where the magic happens. So it's like, if you are creating art just for yourself, like, that's good and fine, but if you're creating art for an audience or to be displayed or whatever, like, it has to be in some way, like, comprehensible enough to the audience, whoever your intended audience may be, for them to be able to discern meaning from it and sort of process it and then, come up with like this new meaning or this new view of life or new view of whatever topic it is you're trying to cover. Like that's where the magic really happens with art.
Can we make a connection between what you've said just a little while ago about Shakespeare needing to be seen to be understood and the connection between author and audience? I think you've just made a connection there. It's almost the same thing, right? That connection between author and audience, that communication is two-way. It's not one way. Like Shakespeare's not meant to be read to you. It's meant to be experienced. Your writing is meant to be experienced, not just read.
All art is meant to be experienced.
Right. Yeah.
Whether it's music or fine arts or whatever, like it's meant to be experienced by an audience. Unless you're, Francisco Goya, like just painting horrifying things for his dining room where he lived alone.
Yeah, exactly.
But even then, like after he died, like we got to see some of the art pieces and it was like, why are you painting Saturn eating his son in your dining room, bro?
What's up with that? Yeah. I love the connection between author and audience. Who has inspired you beyond what we've talked about already? Some people in your life have inspired you, but who inspires you as authors? Who do you look to and find inspiration from?
So like one of the things that you may have noticed about me from the single cross earring or maybe the biblically accurate angel thing, or if you've read my book already, there's a lot of Christian symbolism in there. That is inspired by Philip Pullman, the author of His Dark Materials, which is a trilogy which encompasses The Golden Compass, or it's called The Northern Lights in England, The Subtle Knife, and The Amber Spyglass. These three books together comprise the trilogy. And he, in turn, was inspired by John Milton's Paradise Lost. And I did read that in college and whatnot several times, actually. Like, as an English major, it's you might encounter it quite a bit, especially if you sort of focus on the areas that I did when I was in college. But like, like reading His Dark Materials, like, I think I first read it when I was 9, and then to this day, it is still some of my favorite works of literature. Like, it stands up as a good work of literature, even though it's meant for like children to young adults. Like, it stands up as a good series for like adults as well to discern meaning from. And I don't know, I won't spoil anything, but there is quite a lot of Christian symbolism in there because, if you know John Milton at all, he was like studying to be a priest, but then he decided to be a poet instead. He had a little bit of a, like, I would call him a little bit of a narcissist because he believed himself to be a poet, a priest, and a prophet. The perfect trifecta of fear. He was a little bit full of himself, but he was also a little bit right about that. Because he was like this brilliant writer and whatnot, and both in prose and poetry. And he did sort of like predict some things that were going to come in his writing. It's fascinating. I don't know. Anyway, like he was studying to be a priest because like in that sort of time, he lived during the 1600s. If you were like bookish, the way to go for you was the church. So he went to like Cambridge, I think, and studied to be a priest, and decided not to take orders and instead be a poet, and like a writer. So he also wrote a lot of prose, especially like political prose, just like debating the issues of his time, including the English Civil War. Anyway, what was I going on about? Oh yeah, writers that inspire me. So those two are major ones, but I have to say another one, like a more modern one, is Ada Limon and also Maya Angelou. Both brilliant writers, and like um like so Maya Angelou is obviously like a poet and also a novelist and whatnot, and she when I first read like I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, I think I was a little bit too young to understand it, but I still felt this sort of like magic and power of it. And I've reread it several times. Like it's one of my favorite books. Um, and like it showed me in many ways like the power of words, the power of spoken words. Like why does the caged bird sing? It's because the only thing it can really do is use its voice. So it must use its voice. And then there's Ada Limon, who is like, I believe she's Mexican. I know she's Hispanic. I am not super well versed in the backgrounds of every writer I love, which is tragic. But she uses a lot of like free verse poetry and prose poetry and sort of like her power is in taking like singular images or sensations or stimulations and like expanding upon it to make a bigger theme. And I think that's the strength of a lot of poets. I've been told it's a strength in my poetry as well, but I think like it was inspired from writers like that. And I guess I could also list like Robert Frost and E. Cummings is a big one for me, because he showed me sort of how experimental and free and fun poetry could be. He was also like really interested in linguistics as well. So, yeah, like I have a really big anthology of like his complete works sitting back there on my bookshelf. But yeah, like that's like some of the writers that inspire me.
It's great because it kind of gives us, it's like a recipe, a little bit of this person, a little bit of this person, you mix them all together, and then we have Ariel. So and you kind of put your spin on all of it, right?
Is that a lot of the times you are sort of a collection of your inspirations. Like it's like if you plagiarize a little bit from everywhere or take a concept here or a technique there or whatever, like it will be recognized as your own work because you're not directly plagiarizing. But like, the people who know, like if you know that like I love like John Milton, then you'll see it in my work. If you know that I love Ada Limon, you'll see that in my work, like that sort of thing.
How is it going to feel to you in the future when somebody comes on a podcast like this and talks about your book and the fact that they reached out to you to say that you inspired them? What does that feel like now, if it has happened, which I'm sure you've inspired many people, but in the future, when that email comes and shows up in your inbox that, hi, this is Dave in Canada, and your writing really inspires me. Like, what does that do for you as an author, putting yourself out there, hoping that you connect with an audience?
I mean, that's like sort of why I put the book out there in the first place. Like I was sort of content to keep writing for my own sake and maybe sharing it within my own circles or whatever. But there has been this little voice inside my head for many years that wanted specifically a hardcover book with my name on it. And now I have that. A hardcover book because I prefer hardcover. They last longer, they're sexier, they feel better, or whatever. But mostly why I wanted to write this book is because like I wanted to connect with the audience over like the themes of the book and like my journey through it and for a number of reasons. Like if you're someone who has never experienced any of the things that I've experienced, then maybe it will open your eyes to my experience and allow you to have more sympathy and empathy for people who share the same experience as me. Or if you have experienced some of the things that I talk about in my book, like mental illness and trauma and, like, being, like sort of the first gen, immigrant, or being like too Asian for white people, but too, like American for Asian people, like, or struggling with their sexuality and like with labels and whatever. Like that's the kind of stuff that I want to connect with people on. And if you do relate to that, then I hope that you feel seen, you feel heard, you feel spoken to, you feel that maybe this thing that you haven't been able to put a name to has been put into words for you. Like Edgar Allan Poe is another one of my sort of writing inspirations that I didn't think to mention earlier, but he has this poem called Alone, and it was one of the first poems that like made me cry when I read it, because he says like from childhood's hour I have always been alone, and like I have not seen the world as others have seen it, and I like they have seen the world in different ways that I have seen it, and like the like basically like he was alone because like he just sort of was like a weird dude and like saw the world in a different way than most people. And like I felt that like a lot, as sort of feeling like an outsider in my own community, feeling like an outsider in my family, feeling like an outsider to myself, because there was this sort of like internal battle that was going on that I like didn't know what to do with. Yeah, like I hope that it can make people feel more willing to talk about their own issues, whether they relate to mine or not. Because I've sort of like put it out there. Like there is a poem in my book inspired by a Chinese proverb. The Chinese proverb goes, 家丑不可外扬, which means, basically in English, it means like don't air your dirty laundry in public. It means like literally, it means like, family shames must not be spread abroad. But yeah, I have a poem based on that. Do you want me to read it?
Oh, 100%. Yes. 100%.
So the poem is called Dramaturgy, and I actually begin the poem with, if you can see up here, the idiom and like the definition of it in English.
Okay.
I do that a lot in my book. It's probably because like I actually want my readers to like understand what I'm saying and whatnot. And, like there are poems in my book that use, other languages. Like I took like 4 semesters of German in college. So there's like one, like a Nietzsche quote or something. And then there's like, another that was like based on a specific Tang Dynasty poem. So I put the Tang Dynasty poem in sort of like the afternotes there. So yeah. Anyway,
nice.
like,
I love it.
So this is dramaturgy. Sociological dramaturgy. Front stage first, backstage second. Here is your front stage self. Here is your backstage self. So often at odds. So long as the curtain is up, your mask is down. The word person comes from the Latin persona, an actor's mask, a character in a play. Only later would it come to mean human being. In other words, all the world is a stage, and we are characters first, human second. The show must go on. It does not matter if you are in pain. The show must go on. What we want is acceptance. No, to 给自己面子, to save face, to not let our families 丢脸, lose face, not let the audience see the ugliness through the crack in the mask. So even in this house, there are things you do not speak. The front door may be the entrance backstage, but this performance does not end just because you are no longer on stage. No. So long as there are people, there is an audience. So as long as there are other people, you wear a mask. Even around your fellow cast members. Other people must not see. The show must go on. The show must go on. It does not matter if you are in pain. In this house, there are things you do not speak. It does not matter if you are in pain. You do not speak of the pain, of the shame. You do not speak, and that is for the best. Who would believe you anyway? You are just being lazy. Need to try harder. Go outside. Stop moping. Try harder. Are you even trying? You have nothing to be sad about. I've sacrificed so much for you. What are you even sad about, you ungrateful child? It does not matter if it is not true. It does not matter if you are in pain. You do not speak. Your pain does not matter. Not even to you. Because even alone in your dressing room, you wear a mask. You cannot take it off. You cannot be rid of it. Is it a mask or is it your face? You cannot tell. A persona or a person? You cannot tell. Is there a difference? There are things you do not speak, even to yourself. Things which nobody should speak, outside or in, front stage or back. It does not matter. You do not speak of it, because you cannot, because you do not. You have no vocabulary for it. What is a person if not a mask over a skeleton in the closet? You are in pain, but it does not matter. Push it a little further under the rug. In this house, there are things you do not speak. So that's dramaturgy.
Wow. I love hearing it in your voice, with your inflection, your heart, right? That's, wow. It's powerful. Thank you for sharing that. I don't get the opportunity to hear a lot of authors share their writing on the podcast. We talk about the books, we talk about the process, but to hear it from you, reading your own words, it's amazing. Thank you.
Yeah, I do think another inspiration to my writing is actually spoken word poetry, which is why a lot of my poetry is meant to be sort of readable like that. It makes it more comprehensible to an audience that isn't well versed in reading poetry, and two, I've done a lot of poetry readings at festivals and bookstores and whatever, and I find that it is a very special kind of experience because it's one thing to be in the quiet of your house or on the subway or on the train or whatever and reading the poetry to yourself, but it's another thing to hear it in the author's voice, in the author's inflection, them sort of speaking to you with their words that they've planned out. I don't know. I find that that's a different sort of interpretive experience for the audience and sometimes for the writer as well.
Is there an audio version of the book coming in the future?
There is not an audio version of the book. I debated for a while whether or not I should because I've been told that I have a nice voice, which I used to be really insecure about my voice because my voice is on the lower end. And I was made fun of for it as a child. But then as I grew up into an adult, it was your voice is so low and nice. And it's just I don't know what to believe anymore. But mostly I've come to terms with the fact that yes, I have a decent voice, especially a reading voice. But my poetry does utilize a lot of enjambment, which means line breaks in the middle of a sentence, and it uses a lot of like repetition with slight variation between each repetition, and it uses like slashes and punctuation and whatnot to like dictate breaks and things, and like I feel like a lot of that will be lost with an audiobook.
Unless you can accent them and make them more noticeable. The thing is, listening to you here on the podcast, Ariel, your voice is beautiful. Your writing is beautiful. And for me, the one thing I always have in the back of my head is, yes, we have an audience that will buy our hardcover book, and we're so proud of it. I love it. But there's a portion of our audience that, for whatever reason, can't read any printed word. And I would love for them to have a taste of you in your writings in an audible format, because then they can enjoy that as well. And I just feel that's another portion of the audience that could really identify with you as the creator of this. Yeah. And I would never push anyone to do anything, but I'm just saying your voice is amazing. You're an amazing writer. And I would love for other people to experience this beyond the printed copy in front of you. You have a message for the world, and I would love for more people to be a part of that. So my encouragement to you, and again, by no means no pressure, but I think you're fantastic. So I would really love to see that in the future if that becomes a possibility.
Maybe, like, in the Creator Institute, there is a possibility, like, as you're creating your book to, basically, you don't have to pay much up front to self-publish your book through this program, because you crowdfund by soliciting either donations or pre-sales from like sort of the people that you can like market your book to. And like as you're doing the pre-sale, like you set certain goals for certain publication versions, right? So like if you just want a ebook and a paperback, like that's one tier of fundraising. If you want a hardcover, that's another tier. If you want an audiobook too, like that's another tier. And the thing with the audiobook recording process from New Degree Press is that either you have to have your own equipment and like, I don't know, sit in a closet or something, or rent out a studio, or you have to like get someone else to read it, like hire someone else to read it. And like, I'm a bit of a control freak, so like I'd probably do the reading myself, but like I don't have the equipment and like the resources at this point to do it. But I don't know, maybe in the future,
Let's put a pin on that, and maybe it comes back. But I just want to encourage you, Ariel, you wipe any of that stuff where people are telling you that your voice is not what it should be. I'm loving it. And I want to encourage you that you have so much talent to share with the world that I
used to stream on Twitch actually. Okay. And like read sometimes parts from my books, sometimes parts from other books and stuff like that. And I did not have a very large following, but like I sort of fell off on doing that because like one, I got really depressed, and like two, I got like really anxious about sort of like my appearance and how I was putting myself out there on social media, and just like being perceived by an audience, which is another reason why marketing kind of sucks for me. But like, I don't know, maybe I'll go back to it, especially if I get better equipment, like audio equipment especially, because like my laptop voice capture is good enough for like meetings and stuff like this, but it's not as good for like if you're coming here like for the sake of hearing my voice. Like I should have a better mic or something. I don't know.
If you ever need help, I would love to help you, but I just think you have everything, and you're doing so well. I just want to encourage you. So thank you. Ariel, before we close off, let's talk a little bit about the book, and someone's thinking about buying it. What is your message to them before they purchase it? What can we expect when we when we purchase this book and we open it for the first time, what is your message to them before they read the first word?
So actually, so there is like, if we look at the book, it's like the page, there's the title cover. This one happens to be a signed copy. I have so many signed copies. There's a table of contents. There is the author note, which begins with an epigraph from my own poetry, from later in the book. The author's note is like my introduction, like talking about why I wrote the book and stuff like that, and sort of like what the book is meant to do. And then there comes a warning, which I'll read right now.
Mm-hmm.
Warning. This book contains occasional mentions, frank discussions, and overwrought contemplations of topics which may be sensitive for some readers. These include, but are not limited to, mental illness, suicide, death, violence, abuse, and trauma. There is an appendix at the end of the book which has more details on which poems contain these sensitive themes for those who wish to either emotionally prepare themselves for or to entirely avoid said poems. This book also, rather unfortunately, contains gratuitous use of multisyllabic words which are usually only acceptable in standardized testing, extensive classical and religious imagery, and concepts which ought to have remained within the firm bounds of a Philosophy 101 seminar. The author thinks at least most of it is tasteful enough, but also is aware of her tendencies towards insensitive bluntness and towards beating the dead horse of a metaphor beyond even the hope of reincarnation to get every last damn inch she can out of it. So she sees fit to warn you. There is no appendix cataloging these crimes, however. The entirety of the book is rife with it. Caveat emptor, indeed. As for the content of this collection, some of this is fiction, but all of it is truth. Names, characters, businesses, events, and incidents may or may not be the products of the author's imagination. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or actual events may or may not be coincidental. Read at your own risk.
I love the beating of a dead horse. Wow. Okay. Yeah. There you go. So it's right there in front of you. I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. Ariel, how do we find the book? Where is it? Where can we purchase it? What about your connections as well? Where do we find you and speak with you when we have a question?
Yeah. So, the book is available on Amazon as an ebook, as a paperback, and as a hardcover. You can find it by looking up Ariel Tsai Narcissus. So, again, my name is Ariel Tsai, Ariel, like the mermaid, and Tsai, which is a super common Taiwanese last name, and also the last name of the current Taiwanese president, who is the first female president of Taiwan.
Wow.
Yeah. Narcissus is spelled Narcissus. It is not narcissist, like the disorder, or the person. It is Narcissus, like the Greek youth, in the myth.
Okay, now we didn't talk about that. So before we go, can we give an idea about that as well?
Right,
I think that's important.
Okay, so Narcissus, his story is chronicled in Ovid's Metamorphoses. Ovid was a Latin poet and writer who loved classical mythology, I guess, and like there's a lot of Greek and Roman myths just sort of cataloged in Metamorphoses, and so in his version of Narcissus's myth, Narcissus is a youth who is beloved by all for his good looks, including he is also beloved by himself for his good looks. And he turns down every suitor he gets, male or female, because he doesn't believe that they are good looking enough for him. And one of his spurned suitors prays to the gods, may he get a taste of his own medicine, basically. And the goddess of revenge, Nemesis, she answers. So, while Narcissus is hunting one day in the forest, he's tired, he's thirsty, he finds a pool in a clearing. There's like no bird song, there's like no animals around or anything. It's just this pool, this very still pool in this clearing. And he looks down into the pool to take a drink, and he sees a beautiful youth and immediately falls in love. He doesn't realize why this person like will like sort of interact with him, but then like won't really, and then he's not able to touch him, and he's in the water, and he's like, what's going on? And then finally he passes the mirror test, and then he realizes, oh, that's me. And then there are several versions of the myth. In some versions, he just he is he tries to kiss the reflection in the water, falls in and drowns. In some versions, in his despair of realizing he can never truly be with his one true love, which is himself, he draws himself on purpose. In Ovid's version, Narcissus sort of wastes away in his despair and longing, and he dies at the edge of the pool. But in all versions of the myth, at the end, after he dies, he becomes a narcissus flower, also known as a poet's lily, also known as a daffodil, looking down at the water, at the reflection of himself. So, the reason why I chose this as the sort of inspiration for my book title and for the central theme of my book is that I have always had a very complicated relationship with self-love. Part of it is my culture, like, and my upbringing as the eldest Asian daughter. So it's like, you are sort of born to serve those around you, put yourself second, and the collective comes first, the family comes first, whatever. Others come first. And self-love, putting yourself first, is considered selfish, which is bad. Part of it is also that my dad is possibly a diagnosable narcissist. I don't have much of a relationship with him anymore, but I did in the past, and he was like, abusive in a number of ways. So that's why I don't really talk to him anymore. But there's also so in my life there were like these like two extremes of self-love, like extreme deficit of it and extreme like just an overwhelming amount of it. And I saw these two extremes and I was like, isn't there a middle ground? Like, isn't there some way where it's like I can love myself and be healthy and put myself first, so that it's like on the airplane when they tell you, like, you put your oxygen mask on first before you help anybody else. You have to take care of yourself first before you can really take care of anybody else. And the better you take care of yourself, the better you can take care of others. And that's sort of the journey that the journey and realization that I came to over the years of like thinking and therapy and medication and whatnot. And that's the journey that's chronicled in this book. Like, some poetry collections are just collections of poetry. Maybe they're, dated or something like that. But mine has a story arc. So it's like, it is the Bildungsroman story arc, what literary critics will call it, or like the growth arc, or the coming of age arc, where it's basically the character starts somewhere in kind of a lower place, and then through a series of trials and tribulations ends up in a better place with a better understanding of themselves as a person, and they've like grown up in a way. And like that is the journey of this book. It starts in a really dark place. So the poems in the beginning are pretty sad. But once you get through those, like, there's the trials and tribulations, the explanations of why things are the way they are, my sort of thoughts on like other factors in my life, like beyond just me, like social factors as well. And then coming to a place where it's like, we're not quite where we want to be yet, but we're getting there. And like, that is the story of Narcissus.
Ariel, you are a superb guest for a podcast. I want to let you know, you have taken us on so many paths, but yet brought us all back to the very beginning again. You've tied it all together. You've exposed your heart to us, and you've been very open to share. And it speaks a lot about who you are, and it's shining through as you talk. And I love the proud look on your face as you hold up your book. Please do that again, by the way. Just hold up the book. There you go. I love this because you have put your heart into writing this and sharing this with the world, and you deserve to be proud of what you've accomplished to date. And it's only the beginning.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm excited about is I can say that I had Ariel on my podcast and look where you've gone from here. So there's great things ahead, and I want to celebrate with you all the great things you've done to date, because to put yourself out there like that and not know how people will respond to you or accept what you've written, you've gone ahead and done that. So congratulations. And I'm so happy to have you on the podcast.
I'm very happy to have been here.
It's been a great conversation, and I'm asking everyone, please go to the show notes, go and support Ariel and all the great things that are happening.
About the show notes, you can also add that my social media handles are all Ariel Writes a Bit, WRITESABIT. Ariel Writes a Bit. You can find me on Instagram. You can actually find me on Twitch. I think that's about it. That's where I'm active, especially Instagram. My email is also arielwritesabit@gmail.com. So I will also respond there if you have any queries or questions or whatever.
And if someone wants to buy one of those pre-autographed copies of the book, they can reach out to you as well.
Contact me directly to, take out the middleman fee, and I have both paperback and hardcover signed copies of the book. Shoot me an email or a DM or something like that, and we can work something out. But yeah, otherwise, if you get it on Amazon, it's not going to be signed, but it will still be a beautiful book that I hope you enjoy.
And when you reach out, let Ariel know that you heard Ariel on Living the Next Chapter podcast, and maybe she'll put a little extra note in there to you with her thanks. Thank you so much for being part of the podcast, Ariel.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, you're a super guest. I'm so happy. I want to have you back in the future. Will you come back?
If you'll have me, yeah, of course.
Okay. All right. We're going to make that happen. Thank you. Thank you for being part of Living the Next Chapter. Hey, look, we're having such a great time talking to authors around the world. If you are an author and you would like to be on this very show, I would love to talk to you. livingthenextchapter.com, livingthenextchapter.com, livingthenextchapter.com is the best way to get in touch with us. There you'll find our social media and blah, 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 la-di-da, and such. You, author, soon-to-be author, new author, currently writing your book author, published author, we need you here. The seat's empty, microphone set up, we're waiting for you. livingthenextchapter.com. We would love to have you on the podcast. Yeah, I'm talking to you. Yeah, you should be here. We'll see you at livingthenextchapter.com.
Mindshift Power Podcast, the podcast for teenagers and those who work with them. There's a huge problem in America today. There's a very large disconnect between teenagers and the adults who work with them. I'm looking to bridge that gap with real, raw, honest conversation, not held back by the chains of political correctness. You cannot solve a problem you do not understand. Want to understand teenagers today? Listen to this podcast. This podcast is for teens in the U.S. and Canada. To learn more, go to fatimabay.com/podcast or just look for Mindshift Power Podcast on any listening platform. I look forward to you being a faithful listener.